Today's guest is Sybil Cummin. She is a therapist, among other things, and a podcast host. And I was just on her podcast a couple weeks ago. So now she's coming on with us. And she's here she is. We just met recently. I always say that our content is driven by our clients, and a lot of our people that we end up meeting come through clients as well, where they'll work with someone that they really like. It worked, yay. And they'll say, you two need to have a conversation. So Sybil and I had a conversation a couple weeks ago, and we're like, this is perfect. So because we share a community, we share an audience, but we each come from different angles. And often Chris and I talk about the need for a team to work together to get a person dealing with the crazy family court system and divorce and post-judgment and co-parenting, to get them through like these really hard times. And so, Sybil, I just want to even start with the quote that you said during our last conversation about how it is so important for people to have a supportive community because they heal faster.
Yes.
So why don't you tell people what you do and how that relates, and then we'll just talk about today's topic.
Yes.
And then some.
I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I come from actually a play therapy background. So I came into this a very different way. So specialize in working with children. And it led me into working with survivors of domestic violence and narcissistic abuse. And I was seeing it from the child's perspective. And so went up in family court and saw the dysfunction in family court and how the goal is that, while they say it's to keep children safe and to put children's, best interests in the forefront, that's not what I saw. And so I would testify in court and I'm like, is anyone listening? No one's listening to me. So I started really just jumping in, delving into all of this, and have worked with survivors over the last 13 plus years as adult clients. And those are actually the only adult clients I work with in my practice. But I saw the difference. There was an extreme difference in the speed of healing when people had a safe inner circle of support, is what I call it, or that like support network that is actually safe, compared to those who didn't have that. And so I ran support groups from a therapeutic model, which is good and bad, right? It's like 8 to 10 week groups and then like all done, moving on. But that's not, if you're in this, that's not how long this takes.
It's years sometimes.
8 to 10 weeks, everyone was like, well, but now what? And I'm like, I don't know now what. So because I just kept seeing the same things and people asking, well, now what do we do? I had to just try something differently. So I had to leave kind of that like traditional therapeutic model and move to a community-based model. So then I started the Rising Beyond community, and we do, and it's not, again, it's more of a community support group, peer involvement, rather than like Sybil is the expert therapist that's teaching you how to do the thing. That's a part of it because you can ask me anything, but it is a longer term. There's not a time limit of how long you're in this group. And so that survivors who don't have that, or some people have it outside of their outside of our community, but that they can find that safe place to heal within community. So that is how we came to have a conversation.
Yeah, and when you talked about this safe inner circle of support, I think that people have different people that they rely on for support. We often talk about the top of a table, like our clients are the top of the table, needing as many legs, or not as many, they need proper legs to make them as stable as possible. One of the legs are friends and family, but the problem with friends and family is that they don't always get it, and they inadvertently say things that are really harmful. We know that women in particular in this situation are blaming themselves so much. I know I work with a lot of very professional clients, and so they're successful, highly successful in their other parts of their lives. And so often when friends and family hear that they're going through a situation like that, it's like, well, how could this have happened to you? You're so smart. You're so successful. So it's basically sending the message, how could you have been so stupid? And they are people, and I did it myself. How could I have been so dumb and not seen this?
Yeah.
And so it is really important to have other people there saying, no, me too. And it's not me being so dumb. It's that you're dealing with people that are master manipulators. And the reason they targeted you is because you're so brilliant and so amazing. That's why you're a target, right?
Yeah. And just those inherent qualities that so many try to almost push away when they're trying to heal, because some of the things that make you a really good target are empathy, high levels of empathy, willing to work on yourself, willing to give the benefit of the doubt, really loyal. Like all these amazing qualities are then used against you. And so I really talk a lot with clients, the community members, that we still need to really honor and hold on to those core values and core personality traits that you have that are so amazing, and not let them kind of take that from you, because a lot of women start to push that away of like, well, I can't be this empathic, or I can't, be this trusting or loyal because it will be used against me.
Do you see a lot of people coming out of these situations say, I don't want to date again. I don't want to get involved again because I can't trust myself and I don't want to be taken advantage of again?
I see a huge range. And I feel like there's so many underlying factors. So I see some women and men, because I work with men in my practice. The community I work with, or that I run, is only for female survivors, but that kind of jump right in. And I'm always like, we got to do some healing first. And then on the other end of the spectrum is like, I will never date again. I will never be vulnerable. So it's like, there's not as many in the middle initially, of like that maybe I will give that a shot when I feel like I'm in a good place, or when I feel like I'm healed. Usually that initial is like, I'm going to jump right into another relationship, or I will never date again.
Yeah. I mean, I know it takes time and it takes a lot of work and healing. And I know someone said, what do we do? We'll talk about that in a little while. But I always think about a line that someone told me once about how it makes sense that you're feeling the way you feel right now. But think about how much that person took from your life in the past. Are you willing to give them your future too? So you're going to allow them to take your future chances at intimacy and love and connection with another person because of what happened to you. Like, you want to give all of that up to that person?
Yeah. And it's so hard. So the majority of women that I work with in the community specifically, and then it kind of varies in my practice, they're stuck in the post-separation abuse forever. It feels like it's not forever, but it feels that way.
It's a long time. I mean, years.
Right? So if you share your children with your abusive partner, they are connected to you in this way. And the way our system is set up, it's really set up to support that abuse to continue. And so that makes it so hard. And so it's like, how can we not make this your whole life? How can we make this part of your life something you have to deal with, but it's not your whole entire life? And so that would include, like, what people am I going to meet in my life further on? Am I going to date again? Am I going to build a career that I didn't have before? Am I going to, meet new friends? Like, how is that going to look? And so, but it is so much easier, right, from where I'm sitting, not in that. I get, I see that it's so much easier said than done than to take that piece and like put it over here, that's not all of you and that's not your whole life.
Right. And so, like, that's the thing with you and I coming at the same people, but from different angles. So Chris and I are in the muck with people, but like you say, this is going to take years. So we have to teach you how to turn into background static, because it's not going to end soon. And sometimes people are like, well, once this is all over, then I'm going to take care of other things. And it's hard to do that because you are going to be in survival mode for a long time. So I often point out to people, this has been my life for 9 years, in court, probably about 100 times just in the past few years. But even though it's really, really hard, I've still managed to find tremendous joy. Like, this has also been the happiest I've ever been in my life. I've found new love. I have new business. Like, my kids are doing really well. Like, there's all kinds of things, but there's been those moments of extraordinary difficulty and fear and rage at the injustice.
Yeah.
So we have to really help people understand that that's part of it, but it's not like people are, oh my God, you've been doing it for 9 years, I can't do it. You don't really have a choice in some ways, because there's things that you can control, and that's what we work with our clients on, but there's things that you can't. And the legal system is very, very slow. So when you're on that court calendar, you're kind of stuck for a while, like living in that limbo of what's going to happen next.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a really uncomfortable place to be. And even if, you've done your, final orders and there's nothing in the books yet, there's the waiting, the like, when is the other shoe going to drop feel.
All the
that
time.
Is normal. It is, right? You are experiencing a normal reaction to a really horrific, abnormal situation. So it's not like you're crazy, and maybe you have some symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that. And it all makes sense. There is nothing inherently wrong with you. You are reacting to this situation.
And I think you're just saying those words, it makes people feel better. I know sometimes the first time Chris and I talk with someone and say, this isn't just you. I mean, there's like 80,000 people in America at least, and we have clients all over the world who are dealing with the same thing. This is a thing. It's called legal abuse or paper abuse or stalking through the courts or judicial terrorism. Like, this is a thing. And they're like, oh. And I know when we started the legal abuse support group about 2.5 years ago, I did it because I was like, there's nothing out there that deals with the stuff that I'm dealing with. At that time, legal abuse, I hadn't seen the term anywhere. Now it's come up a lot, which is great, because there's a word for it. So that way, okay, I need help with this particular thing.
Yes.
It's not just my crazy ex. This is how it works, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are a lot of people that can be really helpful to you. And then there are people, right? Like, some of my work is helping train therapists, other therapists, on this, because it's not something we're trained in grad schools. We're not trained, like, we have maybe a training on domestic violence, like this much. But the court has been, I am not, but as a profession, we're really taught to be scared of it from a professional standpoint. Like, do not testify in court ever. You'll lose your license because you'll get grieved and this and that, and you're breaking confidentiality and all the things. And yes, we are at a higher likelihood for grievances, absolutely, depending on the clients we work with. And if we speak in court, we're at a higher grievance risk. If you work with kids, you're at a higher grievance risk too. So those of you out there trying to find like a really good play therapist for your kiddos, it is tough out there, and I know it. And you're like, do I share what's going on and really share what's going on or not? Because they may turn me away if I share. But if you don't share, you may get the wrong person that could not intentionally cause harm, but could cause harm because they don't know.
So let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm glad that you noted that therapists are often not trained in domestic violence, and they're certainly not trained in legal abuse most of the time. Chris and I just did a presentation about 16 therapists at a group, and they were like, when we just described some of our client stories and what legal abuse and coercive control were, they were just literally mouths agape, like, I didn't know this is a thing. This is so bad. This is so wrong. And in my head, I'm thinking, but you're a therapist. I would have thought you knew about this. And they were all like, no, we had no idea.
Yeah.
So it is important to keep talking about these things. And that's why I was so thrilled to meet a therapist who did completely get it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think people come at it from all these different ways, but there's this idea still, right? The myths and misperceptions of what domestic violence is part of the problem, because it actually depends on your location, where you live, what it looks like. But the misperception here is it is going to be a young 20-something uneducated white woman in a trailer, 6 kids, cigarette, blue collar husband or boyfriend that beats her after he drinks.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, when you say domestic violence, it's like, oh, that's what it is. And I'm like, gosh, I've been doing this for a really long time, and I've actually never had that client. Like, they are out there too.
Yeah, right.
But that's not who we have. So I still think there's this idea of what a misperception of what domestic violence actually is. And I was actually trained in a couples and family program because I wanted to work with kids. And in order to work with kids, you have to work with family. And in one of my classes, it was like, okay, if there's domestic violence, don't do couples work, contraindicated, here's why. And I had like 30 minutes on it. And so I was like, oh, okay, great. And this is a longer time ago, so some schools are doing a much better job. My school is doing a much better job now, that there's more awareness of the impacts of this. And some of the couples modalities, like couple therapy modalities, now are offering a lot more education, research, assessment. So it is getting better. But when did I graduate? 2007 with my master's. And so that's what I was left with. That was it. I didn't know how to assess it. I didn't know really what it looked like. I didn't know what it would look like with my kids, like the kid clients I saw. I had no idea.
Wow.
But yeah, there was a dynamic that I was seeing with my kid clients, and I like couldn't put my finger on it. It was like, well, all of this feels weird. And why do I feel weird talking to the parents? Why am I scared to talk to the parents? Well, that's weird. I'm not as confident, loud. Like, I'm really confident. Great with kids and great with parents. Like, what is this? And it was domestic violence. It was domestic violence. I would be, like triangulated before I knew anything. And I would be like, well, shit, like, why
All right,
am I?
describe that, Sybil, because I want to really get into triangulation and the insidious nature of how it happens, and especially when a therapist is involved. Because I talked to a therapist friend of mine a few weeks ago, and she also was talking about the power struggle when parents are involved, and she's working with the child as a client.
Yeah.
So how are you as the therapist triangulated from the very beginning when there's a domestic violence situation between the parents?
Yeah. So what typically happens, and it's so funny because now my spidey senses are so sensitive that like within that first like 2 or 3 minutes of a phone call with a specific parent, I'm like, oh, okay, I see you. But it took me a really long time to figure out how to work with it. But very often, so sometimes it will be the abusive parent or partner calling me to get services. And what that feels like is, well, our child is experiencing this, and I don't want to talk bad about the other parent, but and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I get the story how horrible the other parent is. When the non-abusive partner is calling me, it looks different. There is a lot of fear about telling me anything because of there's retribution for moving the mask. So I see here, and then when I finish a sentence for them, then it's floodgates are open because they're like, oh my gosh, someone who gets this. So you're a therapist out there listening. That's what that feels like. What's really important for me, and I have learned over time through mistakes, and lots of stress, trial and error with me talking to my attorney as well, because I have an attorney on. If you work with kids, have an attorney on retainer, therapists out there.
Wow.
I and I tell both parents this, but I can usually be like, I see both of you. So I tell both parents, but I really tell the non-abusive parent, this is going to feel really uncomfortable to you. And I am going to hold all of your kiddos' information so close to my chest. I am not going to share it with either of you. And I know that feels bad. I know, like, I'm a mama. I know that that feels really scary, and I am doing it to protect you and your child. Because if I am sharing specific information, it can be used against the child, right? So there's this inherent, like, what are you doing in therapy feel from parents in general, I think. But if I'm really scary to you because I'm a mandated reporter, or that I can develop really good relationship with kids and they tell me things, an abusive parent, I am literally probably the scariest person to them because of those. So I'm not going to share all of their stuff with you. I require, unless there's an order of protection, which then we have some workarounds, but I require that both parents email me with the parent CC'd, and any email I send is going to both parents at the same time. And I limit my communication because if say I have like a really good, strong relationship with your child, and I'm talking with one parent a lot more than I'm talking with the other parent, they will go into court and say, Sybil's biased. We need to change their, and that is what's harmful to the child. So I have learned that over time. Very often I do intakes with both parents. That's so important for me, which scares people, but I do because that's data. That's data for me. How is this parent sharing their concerns versus how this parent is sharing their concerns? Is this parent trying to schmooze me and like stroke my ego and I'm the best therapist ever and oh my gosh, I can't believe we found you? Hey, actually, and then they start to try and F with my boundaries. That's data, right? For me to have when I'm working with the child. So they will try to take hold of the narrative of what's going on with the child. And they will, so that is how they try to triangulate me. And I was before I knew anything, I'm sure of it. But I don't allow one person to control the narrative. I allow the child to control the narrative. My observations and time with the child, that is what that's what I'm trained to do. That's what I'm trained to assess. And with parents, it's just information for me. It's just information. How are the parents talking about the child? Well, I don't know what's going on at mom's house because they're perfect with me. I hear that all. They actually,
Same.
Therapy. I'm not sure why they need therapy because they are just angels at my house. And I'm like, you know what? Therapy's not just for crazy people. Therapy's not just for crazy kids. Like, let's give them as much skill as we can give them. Let's give them as many safe people in their world as we can give them. And I say those things and I know they're like, oh, Sybil, you're so amazing. And it behind the scenes, they're like, this woman is scary. I know those things. So that is, as the therapist, is how I am less likely to be triangulated. Am I still bamboozled sometimes? Yes. So that's the tricky part. And I don't like to share the horrors of, y'all are already in this situation. So I don't like to rub salt in the wound, but there will be someone who knows the thing. And we are still sometimes pulled directions and it takes us a minute to see it. And just being honest that I have been in that situation where I'm like, oh, I really feel this. I really feel this. You know, this parent, I don't think they're abusive. They show empathy, right? And then further down the line, I'm like, oh, cool. I'm just another person they were able to con. There is a difference.
And they probably got a bigger hit from conning you because you're a professional.
Yes. And I specialize in this, and yet this is not on my therapy website on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Very purposeful, because if I have like domestic violence specialist all over my practice website, what clients am I not going to get to see? Your kids.
Right.
Because
Right. And
so if someone now, because I have the community, I have the podcast, I write a lot, I talk a lot, I do legislative work. Now if someone Googles me, if they do their due diligence, then they won't sign consent for me. But if they just look at my practice website, they're like, yep, she works with kids, great, moving on, she'll be fine.
yeah.
And how I get consent that way. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So the therapist that I talked to a few weeks ago said one thing that really helped her from being triangulated was the judge's order said that neither parent was supposed to contact the therapist unless it was like some extraordinary emergency, but that the communication would come from her towards them
Yes.
when she needed something. So she drove the relationship and wouldn't be subjected to all the, why don't you answer me? And so that I thought was so helpful, because I thought maybe clients should ask judges, can you order that neither of us can seek out the therapist unless it's an emergency? Some people don't like that, but it kind of allows you to do your job.
I think I am pretty boundaried and really comfortable in this space. So my direction is pretty specific, right? But most therapists don't, like in their initial intake sessions or in their paperwork, don't have this. Like, it's in my paperwork. Like, hey, if we're dealing with a air quote, oh, y'all can see me on Instagram, not a podcast. I was like, I'm on a podcast, so I have to say I'm doing air quotes. But if you are in a high conflict divorce situation where court is involved, this is what I require for communication. You can send me updates. I may not respond. So sometimes it's really helpful to get an update about how things are going with school, how things are going, whatever. And I take in information. But similar to you, if you are communicating with your partner who is, on your co-parenting app, you don't have to respond to everything. I don't either. I don't either. Sometimes I will acknowledge I received the email, and that's it. Again, and I know, again, from an anxious mama perspective or an anxious dad perspective, that can feel really scary, but it is actually to protect your child. That's why we do it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're explaining that here, because we do have the anxious moms and dads who are like, but why? But why? And also keep in mind, and this is what we see with our clients who are dealing more with lawyers that they talk about, is in the relationship, the silent treatment has been used as a punishment. So then when they start a new relationship with a professional, if they're sending stuff to a professional and the professional is not answering, they feel on some level like they're being given the silent treatment. Again, it's a punishment. It's important to understand from a therapist perspective or from a lawyer's perspective. We often say to our clients, keep in mind, this is not something personal with you. Probably it feels like it.
Yeah.
But these people have a bunch of other cases and a life on the weekends. And your case is the center of your world, as it makes sense to be, but it's not the center of their world. And so it's not the same to them.
Yeah.
But don't take it as that they're, punishing you or they don't like you if they're not answering.
Yeah. And this is, I think I do this more so with the younger kiddos who I really do. And I need to protect the older kids too. I work with teens. Also, they're so fun. Love me some teens. But the little ones who don't really have any voice, this is so important. And then also holding it close to my chest, there's what is an abusive person going to say? If I have to report sexual abuse disclosure, if I have to report child abuse disclosure, anything like that, the other parent's coaching.
Right.
The other coaching. And so if I do it's an experiential type therapy. So I'm not going to sit across from a 5-year-old and have a conversation. That is not what it looks like in play therapy at all. And so we are trained, play therapists are trained to assess based on play, to do different things based on play, to intervene in a play manner. And so if you do worry that your child's being coached, it's harder when they're a little bit older, it's different. Like that 10 and up, it's different. But the younger ones, making sure they're in an experiential therapy. So that's play therapy, art therapy, music therapy, because if there is a concern about coaching, how is the parent going to coach the child to play with me a specific way if they don't know what that like, right? So the 5-year-old or 6-year-old comes in and is like, my dad touches me inappropriately. And I'm like, really? What's that like? I don't know. It's inappropriate. Like, I wonder what that even means. They don't know. Because the 5-year-old's not going to say those words. Right. But if they're playing specific ways with me, or they have specific boundaries with me, I use my physical body in the room, like kids, they're kids, right? It is much harder to coach play, art, music than it is talk therapy. And so that I always recommend. I was talking, who was I talking about? Oh, Barry Goldstein, actually, the attorney from New York, whatever. We were talking about that how he has seen that as well, of like, oh my gosh, like we need that experiential play therapy because it removes that pretty extensively. So I am biased because I'm a play therapist, but that's what I see, is that it is harder to coach a child in play.
That's really important. So those of you listening, if this is an issue, which it often is in this community, see if you can find an experiential play coach, a play therapist. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. What about
I answer a question? Pay attention.
Yeah.
How early can play therapy be beneficial? We at my practice are trained in 3.5 and up. Usually the 3s and youngers, you need parent involvement, which makes it trickier to do this work, because we have to suss some things out and we need to make sure the parent is safe, like psychologically safe to do the work. There are some, it's actually called infant mental health, which is like, we're not actually doing mental health with like 3-month-olds, but there are that are trained in infant mental health, and that is under 3. And it's just a different model. We don't do that here. I have some training in it, but it's not my joy, so I don't do it.
Interesting. Okay, what about somebody had asked earlier, if one parent, we tend to think it's the abusive parent, declines the child's therapy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Deal with that.
Happens all the time. So the part of it is not in and this is hard, but a lot of it's not in my hands, right? Because I can only do what I can do, and licensure, like my licensure, I am held by certain standards. So I need consent if there is joint decision making. So what I tell parents who, right, they're calling, they're sharing their story, and we're doing the initial intake, either myself or the intake coordinator. It's like, how likely will your ex-partner sign consent for our services? 50% of the time they're like, they won't. And then it's like, okay, so I'm really sorry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news that we won't be able to work with them unless there's a court order or we get their signature. And so then sometimes we will let them know, like, so this needs to be done legally. What's a benefit to you is if a pediatrician has recommended, if a school counselor or teachers have recommended, because a judge is like, that pediatrician's stupid, we're not going to do that. Right? So they listen to doctors, they listen more so. So if you really want your kiddo in therapy and you can't get consent, first stop, if you haven't done it, is going to the pediatrician and get recommendation. And you're going to share, like, these are my concerns, these are the behaviors, I'm really worried, and get the recommendation from there, then you'll typically have to like go into the co-parenting app and be like, we just received a recommendation from Dr. So-and-so at the wellness check for play therapy. Here's 3 play therapists I have found. What, do you have some thoughts? Blah, blah,
Pick
blah.
one.
You do, right? The song and dance, and they'll still be like, well, they'll ghost you first.
Yeah,
They're not,
that's right.
but then
No. Or they'll say, no, everything is fine. You're the one who's ruining the child. Why do you have to do this? And then another 7 pages of that.
yes. So, but if you have the recommendations, there's been behavior changes in school. That is very often a judge will order therapy. But we just legally can't see someone without consent if there's joint decision making. We're probably not going to break the law on purpose if we know. Like, you're seeing that therapist, you don't want to see that therapist if they're willing to break that.
Yeah. So another thing that came up is, I think you sort of answered it, but let's see, is what do you do if kids don't open up? So, but you said you focus on the playing.
Yeah. So sometimes it takes a long time. They are like you, often living where they don't totally know who to trust, how to trust, been told not to trust, been even overtly or covertly told that this family stuff is secrets.
Yeah.
Right. So it takes a long time for me sometimes to develop that trust with my kiddos or with my teens. And so, like you as a parent, for them to trust you is, I need to be 100% consistent. All the time. They come in and they know how I'm going to feel to them. They know what I'm going to do. They know how I'm going to interact. Because that will build safety for them. And so that is one thing. It just, sometimes it takes longer to build safety. I specifically, even with my little tinies, like my 4-year-olds, I will always get consent before I talk with you or other parent, even if they're 4 and they're like, don't totally understand, but maybe they have a ritual at the end of session, which helps them regulate. Like I see, like they do this every session and they regulate. And I'm like, both parents need to know that if their child is dysregulated, they could do this activity or have this available and it'll help them regulate. Right. And so I'll say, gosh, you love my sand tray. Like you just love my sand tray and your body just seems so calm and relaxed when you're in my sand tray or when you're playing with my sand tray. Could I tell your mom and dad that you just love my sand tray so much? They don't care. Sure, whatever. Yeah. I'm still going to every time because that gives them autonomy of their stuff, which is what's taken from them from a cluster B type parent.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It gives them agency because they can say no.
Yes. And then I wouldn't, because that's not a safety issue. Sand tray is not a safety. And I do the same thing depending on the age. Like clearly if it's a safety issue, they have no choice. Sometimes I will ask my teens like, hey, this is a safety issue and I actually am legally required to talk to your parents about this. How should we do that? And I still give them agency. I'm not going to go tell on them. I give them the option. Some of them are like, you tell them, or I'll be like, can we bring them in? Can I bring them in here? Should I call them on, like, how do you want to do this? Because I have to, because you're not safe. Again, they don't love it and they're mad at me. And sometimes they're like, I don't trust you anymore because you told my parents. And it's like, yeah, and your safety is more important. And I care about you enough that you can hate me forever, but you are worth it enough for me to keep you safe. And usually they don't hate me forever.
Yeah. So the thing about triangulation, now let's talk about, instead of the parents triangulating, when the kids are in the middle, and I think I mentioned to you, Sybil, this is big topic of the book that we're working on now, is how to handle it when your kids are being triangulated. So some kids won't say anything. But what do you do when you see a kid that is very protective of whatever? I think generally of a little bit older kids than really little kids,
Yeah.
that is so afraid to be, I'll say, disloyal
Yes.
to one parent. Like, how do you get in there? Or any ideas for those of us out here thinking, what do I do? Because a lot of people in these situations feel completely helpless, and that's why I felt like it's such an important topic to do another book on, because we often say that once people are out of these abusive relationships, their partner, their ex, is limited to three things: money, kids, and the court, to exert power and control. So money and courts go hand in hand, but the kids, that goes on and on even after the legal battle. And I
Yeah.
think about loyalty and how with these toxic people, it's like, you're with me or you're against me. So if you're with me, then you have to kind of discard that other parent. And so a lot of our clients' kids are in these situations. Help.
Yeah. Yeah. It is hard. And it's, and so when I'm doing kind of the parent coaching piece, as early as you can do it, your focus is, I think Dr. Cochiola said this language and I stole it. I told her I was stealing it because it was amazing. You are going to give your child the gift of perspective. I think that was her language. And you're going to give them the gift of perspective because it's not about what you say to them exactly, because it's actually their nervous system doesn't listen to words the same way. So we need to help them feel the difference between one's house versus the other house. So they need to feel what unconditional love and care feels like, versus the other side is not unconditional. It's just not. It will always have strings attached, right? So that is the number one goal, is to help them feel the difference. And so how are you going to do that? And what's hard is it's like, it takes time. It's not like, oh, yes, they felt it all done. It is consistency over time that they can mess up. They cannot be perfect. They can do the thing. This doesn't mean you're not setting boundaries. You're setting compassionate boundaries with them about how they can act, but they need to be able to have a safe place to fall. And that's with you. And so a lot of that is you doing your own work, so that if they say something to you that sounds a whole lot like what you heard when you were with your partner, that you can respond and not react. And so that is really, that's hard work. That's like so much work, and it's going to take you time. It's about spending time with them that is not like important. Does that make sense? So it's not like always
Pressure.
baseball, always doing the thing, always going to Disney, always doing all of that. It's just being with. So like an example, this was years ago, but my oldest was totally into Fortnite. Do I care about Fortnite? Not at all. I don't want it. Video games are horrible, but whatever. There was this event for Fortnite, and there was a countdown of 24 hours, and it was just, and I was like, oh my God, this is so crazy, but cool. So I sat with my kiddo during this event. Did I understand why it was cool? Not at all. Still don't know why it was cool, really. But the fact that I was sitting with him during the event, he still remembers it. And he brings it up. Oh, Mom, do you remember? And so it was something that was really important to him. So that's sort of, you're going to be a play therapist a little bit, is it's going to be child directed. What do they like? What do they care about? Do I have any interest in Pokemon? I do not have any interest in Pokemon. Are we going to Pokemon trading night tonight? We are. So fun. But it's so excited about Pokemon trading night. And so getting into their world, what is important to them? Because on the other side, you're going to give them that gift of perspective. It's not about Pokemon. It's about being the best one on the football team. It's about getting straight A's. It's about stroking the ego over here.
Appearances. It's about appearances. It's not about authenticity.
So for you, it is knowing them, seeing them as who they are. And it is really hard. Another just kind of trick is just narration. I talk about this a lot. So a lot of play therapy is narration. We're going to narrate what they're going through. We're not telling them, like, we're not putting words in their mouths, but they like sit like all slumped because they're waiting for their parent to pick them up. They're waiting and they're 20 minutes late. They're 30 minutes late. And we can't. So what a lot of people do, right, is like, I bet your dad's coming. I bet he just got left at work or stuck at work. And so we like basically excuse their behavior. And then you're going to feel a certain way, like, excusing their behavior. Like, why am I doing that? I hate them. And you're like, because you don't need to be excusing their behavior. So we're not going to excuse their behavior, which is hard because you see your kiddo just so sad. We don't want our kids to feel sad. And it's okay that they feel sad. Right?
That's an important comment to pause after.
Yes.
It's okay that your kids feel sad. It's horrible
okay.
for us.
They need to be seen that they're sad. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like the way you're sitting makes me think you feel so sad right now. Bloop. Just an observation. Just an observation. They just need to be seen in that situation. We don't need to make it better, because part of them growing up is learning that they can feel things, and it'll be like, feelings don't stay forever, right? And so if you're in the healing process and you're like, you're crazy, Sybil, because feelings feel like they last forever, then that again is some of your work. Or if you're like feeling so immense shame because your child's like at the door waiting, because then it goes back to what we were talking about before of like, oh my God, why did I choose this person? I chose this partner. It's my fault that my child is now waiting and so sad. And I should have said it this way in court, so they didn't see their dad or they didn't see their mom or whatever it is, right? That, they're feeling sad because this person isn't showing up for them. That's why. And so it makes sense for them to feel sad that this person that they want to show up is not showing up. So just kind of naming it for them. You can say something like, is there something I can do to help? Do you want me to sit with you while you wait? Do you want a snack while you wait? Do you need your stuffy while you wait? Whatever it might be, it's the being with, right?
Right.
And being, because they're sad and we can still be with them. So that kind of goes to that, it's a safe place for them to fall. Right.
And what I hear you saying too is it's what do you need, not what I think you need.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes we're pretty intuitive. You might know, like, we're pretty intuitive about our kiddos, but again, let's give them some agency. Maybe they don't want you to sit snugly with them. Maybe it's because they're worried that if other parent comes and sees you sitting all snugly, they'll be in trouble or they'll have to talk about it, something like that. So it's okay. And the other piece, I guess, and I was looking at the time, oh my goodness, we just could talk forever.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my, almost
I'm
an hour.
Off here in a minute, but is that, what was I even going to say? Darn it. It was really good.
So
it was really important.
If they don't, there's reasons why they might not want to snuggle.
So this is really, really hard. And I wish that I could tell you this is not what I tell parents. So your child is going to learn how to fawn as a trauma response. That's hard. Like, you don't want your kids to have this trauma response. And if they are not with the protective, safe parent all the time, you actually want them to develop that if it's going to keep them safe. So I am not going to try and eliminate that response when I'm working with kids. if it's going to keep them safe at a less safe parent's home, right? Fawning kept y'all safe. Fawning kept y'all safe. And you probably still do it. And you notice yourself doing it with a judge, with an attorney, with a therapist, right? And so it's not removing that from them. It's giving them the insight that they do it. Because their nervous system is going to tell them if they are safe or not. I can't be like, well, you're safe here. Their nervous system's going to do that for them. And so if their nervous system is like, not safe, they're going to be in a trauma response. And if they really feel not safe, and it doesn't have to be physical safety, right? It can be all the safeties. Then they're going to need to use skills to keep them there. Right? So that is really hard. And sometimes I'll say something like, I wish that you could tell your parent how you feel. I wish you could tell them how you really feel. And they're not.
You're not saying you should.
No.
Right.
Because that's safe for them. So
right. And also when you said about how you don't say this is a safe place and they're not feeling it, if you did that, that would be creating cognitive dissonance because they know how they feel on some level, but a grown-up is saying that's not how you should feel, and that like they don't need more of that.
Oh, no, I don't. I'm like, have I ever said that? I don't think I've ever said that to my kiddo clients. When I state the rules of my play therapy room, I feel like they get a little like, this is a different space, because I say, you can say any words in here you want. There's no words off limits. So of course I have like that 8-9-year-old that's going to throw out every bad word because it's funny and they want to try it. It's fine. But there are no words off limits. You can use the toys in my office however you want to use the toys in my office, as long as you don't hurt me, or break them on purpose. Like all these things on purpose. And then this is just for my own things. Keep the sand in the sand tray because I don't want to be cleaning up all the sand. But those are the rules in my office. And so that feels different to them too. So that's not like, oh gosh, Sybil has these amazing play therapy rules. They're so amazing. No, a lot of play therapists have similar rules to this. It is kind of how we are trained to do this, but to create the safe space. But yeah, initially it's like some weird lady who's like, they're in this room with all these, like, they don't know I'm safe yet. So they have to build that safe.
And you're allowing them to, just like we say to the judge and other professionals, you're honoring them to draw their own conclusions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Based on their experience and what they see, hear, and feel.
Yep. And I'm sometimes not it, and that is always okay too. So for the most part, my kiddos resonate with me and we connect really well, but there'll be one or two that we just don't, and that's okay. And so they always have that option too of like letting me know those things or letting their parents know those things. So, but I can actually hear my clients out there. This, when you work with kids, you can hear.
Okay, so Sybil, quickly, I'm gonna put it on our feed, but just how can people find you best?
Yes.
And thank you so much for this awesome conversation. This is not the last.
Yeah. So you can reach out to me at www.risingbeyondpc.com. You can contact me through there. You can shoot me an email, info@risingbeyondpc.com. If you're in Colorado, my practice is Arvada Therapy Solutions, but we cannot work with people outside of our state based on licensure. So there's that. But anyway, it was great.
Thank you so much. This was amazing.
Yeah, I'm so glad. I hope it is helpful to everyone who's going to listen.
Definitely. All right, go play with your clients.
Bye.
Okay, bye.